Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Nur Haziqah binti Zulkapli and my student ID is 2023214314.
Welcome to our contrastive analysis presentation. Today we'll be exploring the similarities and differences between English and Bahasa Melayu through a beloved children's story, Puss in Boots, or in Malay, Kucing yang Bijak. We actually chose this story for a few reasons. Firstly, it's a well-known fairy tale that exists in both English and Malay, making it ideal for a side-by-side linguistic comparison. Secondly, it contains rich narrative structures and various sentence types, which are perfect for analyzing syntax, morphology, and also semantics. Thirdly, since this is a children's story, it uses simple and direct language, making it easier for us to spot patterns that are useful for second language L2 learners. The two versions we used are published by Quality Books Sendirian Berhad, written and adapted by Nurul Azila Arifin and Mimi Samuel, both created for Malaysian readers to enjoy the tale in dual language format. Let's now move into the core of our presentation, the contrastive analysis. I'll be explaining the linguistic items we selected and how they compare in English and Malay. To carry out our analysis, we focused on three linguistic components: syntax, morphology, and semantics. For each component, we selected three examples to highlight their usage in both English and Malay. Let's now begin with syntax. Syntax is the way we arrange words in a sentence to make it grammatically correct and meaningful. It's about sentence structure. For example, what comes first, the subject or the verb? Where do adjectives go? How do we form questions or negatives? In this storybook, we looked at full sentences in both languages and compared how they are structured, like the order of words, the use of prepositions, and how noun phrases are built. Moving on to the first example, prepositions, which are words that show the relationship between a noun and another word in the sentence. Usually it's about time, place, or maybe a direction. For example, in the storybook, the Malay version is Kucing menolak tuannya ke dalam sungai, while the English version is Puss pushed his master into the river. Here, the similarity is both languages use prepositions to show direction. Meanwhile, the difference is Malay places the preposition after the verb plus object, ke dalam sungai, whereas English places it before the noun, into the river. The second example is the word choice. This refers to how different words are selected in English and Malay to express the same idea, and whether one language uses more or fewer words. In the example, the Malay version is Anak bongsu berasa sangat sedih, while the English version is The youngest son was sad. The similarity here is both express emotion, while the difference is Malay often uses intensifiers like sangat, while English can convey the same feeling with just one word, which is sad. The third example is noun phrase. A noun phrase is a group of words that act together like a noun, usually made up of a noun and a modifier like an adjective or possessive. For example, in Puss in Boots, the Malay version is Tuan saya tinggal di kastil dan memiliki tanah yang luas, and the translated version is My master lives in a castle and owns a big land. Here, the similarity is both languages use possessive pronouns, and the difference is the word order differs. In Malay, the structure is noun plus possessive, tuan saya, whereas in English it is possessive plus noun, my master. So what we noticed from this analysis is that Malay version is more flexible and relies heavily on context, while English is more fixed and rule-based. Areas like prepositions and word formation may be difficult for Malay L2 learners because English often requires more grammatical precision. However, familiar sentence patterns and word functions in both languages, like showing emotions or possession, can ease the learning process. To help second language learners, we've come up with a few practical suggestions based on the patterns we observed in our contrastive analysis. So firstly, we recommend that learners practice using prepositions through gap-fill exercises and sentence rearrangement activities. This is because Malay prepositions are used differently. They often come before a noun or a location phrase, just like in English, but English preposition placement is much more rule-based and specific. By doing gap-filled tasks, learners can focus on choosing the correct preposition for the right context. Sentence rearrangement also helps them get used to how prepositions are positioned within English sentence structures. Secondly, we encourage learners to use strong and specific adjectives to express emotions instead of combining multiple vague or redundant words. For example, instead of saying feel very sad, just using heartbroken or devastated sounds more natural in English. This not only improves fluency but also avoids direct word-for-word translation from Malay, where intensifiers like sangat are commonly used. Finally, we suggest that learners use translation activities and drilling to better understand how noun phrases and articles are used in English. Malay often omits articles like a or the and has a different order for describing things. For instance, the noun usually comes before the modifier. Drills and translation tasks help learners become more familiar with English noun phrase structure. Next, we looked at morphology, which is the study of how words are formed. It looks at roots, prefixes, suffixes, and how adding or changing parts of a word affects its meaning or function. In the storybook, we spotted examples of how English and Malay form words like married or berkahwin, and how each language handles tense, job titles, and so on. The first example is inflectional morphology. This is when we change the form of a word to show tense, plural, or possession, but the word stays in the same category. For example, the Malay sentence is akhirnya Marquis dari Carabas berkahwin dengan putri. Meanwhile, the English one is finally the Marquis of Carabas married the princess. For the similarity, both talk about actions related to marriage, while the difference is Malay uses the base verb berkahwin, while English changes the form to married, showing tense through inflection. The second example is derivational morphology. This is when we create a new word by adding a prefix or suffix that changes the category of the word. For example, from verb to noun. For example, the Malay version is tukang kisar meninggal dunia, while the English version is a miller passed away. The similarity is both derive words from verbs. The difference is Malay often uses compound forms like tukang plus verb, while English uses a single derived noun like miller. The third example is free morphemes. These are complete words that can stand alone and still carry meaning, not attached to anything else. For example, the Malay version is ia menghadiahkan arnab kepada raja, while the English version is he gave the rabbit to the king. The similarity for both is that they use standalone words with full meaning, while the difference is the words differ entirely, although the structures can be translated.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Amirah Khadijah binti Syamuddin. My student ID is 2023643604. And I will be presenting the evaluation for morphology. Firstly, all three morphological features, inflection, derivation, and free morphemes, show that Malay has a more context-driven structure, while English is morphologically rich and rule-based. For example, in Malay we might say Marquis dari Carabas berkahwin dengan puteri. There is no change in the verb to show past tense. It stays berkahwin. But in English, we must say married. The verb must change to indicate that the action happened in the past. This is known as inflectional morphology, and it is something Malay learners must pay close attention to when using English. Secondly, English uses derivational morphology much more extensively. Take the Malay phrase tukang kisar. It literally means someone who grinds. In English we say a miller, which is a single derived noun. This shows how English forms new words from root words using affixes, a process that is less visible in Malay. And thirdly, both languages use free morphemes, words like give, cat, or king that stand on their own. However, English requires these morphemes to be placed correctly in the sentence. For example, he gave the rabbit to the king. If we rearrange it, the meaning changes entirely. But in Malay, the sentence dia bagi arnab kepada raja allows more flexibility. So let's move to the next part. Suggestions for L2 learners. So, what does this mean for learners? Here are 3 main suggestions. First one, avoid direct translation. Learners should not rely on translating word by word from Malay to English. For instance, saya telah makan is not I have eat. In English, we must say I have eaten using the correct past participle form. Teaching must emphasize patterns in English, not just meaning. Second one, use English dictionaries with word families. Instead of learning one word at a time, look at how that word appears in different forms. For instance, create, creative, creator, creativity. This builds a mental map of how word structure and usage. The third one, apply vocabulary in full sentences. Don't just memorize words like invitation or refuse on their own. Use them in context. For instance, I received an invitation to my friend's wedding, or she refused to join the competition. This helps develop awareness of tense, subject-verb agreement, article use, and more. In short, mastering English morphology requires more than memorizing words. It involves understanding how those words change, how they fit into sentences, and how their meanings shift depending on context. For Malay-speaking learners, this means stepping away from direct translation and embracing a new structured way of thinking about language. In this part of the presentation, I'll be discussing semantics, the study of meaning in language. We'll look at 3 areas: lexical semantics, sentential semantics, and pragmatic semantics. By comparing Malay and English, we can see how the meaning is expressed differently at each level. Okay, let's begin with lexical semantics, which deals with the meanings of individual words. Consider the sentence from the story. In Malay, ia memberitahu raja hadiah itu daripada tuannya, Marquis dari Carabas. In English, he told the king the rabbit was from his master, the Marquis of Carabas. In Malay, pronouns like ia and tuannya are common and rely on context. But in English, the structure must be explicit. Its noun or pronoun must be clear. The sentence would sound strange if we omitted the subject or object. This shows that English learners must learn to be more specific when constructing meaning. Next, we have sentential semantics, which is about the meaning of full sentences. For instance, in Malay, Putri memuji Marquis dari Carabas. But in English, the princess praised the Marquis of Carabas. These sentences carry the same meaning. However, English relies on strict word order, subject, verb, object. In Malay, sentence order can be a little more flexible without losing meaning. For English learners, this means that they must pay careful attention to word order to avoid confusion or unintended interpretations. And lastly, we explore pragmatic semantics, which refers to tone, politeness and implied meaning. In Malay, jangan bersedih, saya akan buatkan tuan berasa megah dengan saya. But in English, do not be sad, I will make you proud of me, master. In Malay, words like tuan and berasa megah reflect formality and respect. But in English, we still show respect, but it is done more through tone and structure than through honorifics. For Malay speakers, this shift can be challenging because they may feel that English sounds too direct or even impolite. So, they need to learn how English conveys politeness using softening words like could, please, or would you mind. To sum up, semantic differences between Malay and English exist at the word level, sentence level, and social level. By becoming aware of these contrasts, L2 learners can improve not only their vocabulary but also their tone, grammar, and communicative effectiveness in English. Let's now discuss the evaluation of semantic contrast between Malay and English, followed by practical suggestions for second language learners. First, the contrast in communication style is perhaps the most significant. Malay tends to be context-rich, indirect, and polite. Politeness is shown through honorifics like tuan and careful word choice. Meanwhile, in English, communication is more direct, structured and explicit. For example, when the cat says, "Saya akan buatkan tuan rasa megah dengan saya." In English, "I will make you proud of me, master." The English version is shorter and more direct, while the Malay version adds a respectful tone. This shows that how pragmatic meanings like politeness is encoded differently in each language. Second, each semantically has its own demands. Lexical semantics requires learners to be precise with word meanings. Sentential semantics asks for correct sentence structure and clarity, while pragmatic semantics needs learner to recognize tone and appropriateness. Finally, learners need to go beyond translation. It is not just about converting words, it's about adapting to new cultural and communicative norms. Let's now discuss the evaluation of semantic contrast between Malay and English, followed by practical suggestions for second language learners. First, the contrast in communication style is perhaps the most significant. Malay tends to be context-rich, indirect and polite. Politeness is shown through honorifics like tuan and careful word choice. Meanwhile, in English, communication is more direct, structured and explicit. For example, when the cat says, "Saya akan buatkan tuan rasa megah dengan saya." In English, "I will make you proud of me, master." The English version is shorter and more direct, while the Malay version adds a respectful tone. This shows that how pragmatic meanings like politeness is encoded differently in each language. Second, each semantically has its own demands. Lexical semantics requires learners to be precise with word meanings. Sentential semantics asks for correct sentence structure and clarity, while pragmatic semantics needs learner to recognize tone and appropriateness. Finally, learners need to go beyond translation. It is not just about converting words, it's about adapting to new cultural and communicative norms. So, how can Malay learners improve their English semantics? Here are 3 practical strategies. First one, think in English. Encourage learners to form sentences naturally in English without relying on translation. This helps reduce the use of overly indirect phrases or literal expressions. For example, instead of translating "saya berasa sangat sedih," just say "I'm sad." Second one, retell Malay stories in English. This helps learners practice tone and clarity. Take any local tale, for instance, Sang Kancil, and try telling it in English. You will quickly notice how sentence structure, tone, and even the choice of words must change to fit English norms. And the third one, get feedback from fluent speakers. Feedback allows learners to understand whether their tone is polite, their structure is clear, and their message is appropriate. It also helps with fluency and natural expression, especially in formal or academic settings. In conclusion, mastering semantics in English means more than just knowing words. It means knowing how to use them clearly, politely, and appropriately. For Malay-speaking learners, the goal is to develop both linguistic accuracy and cultural awareness and communication. To conclude, the bilingual adaptation of Puss in Boots clearly demonstrates how stories can be powerful tools in second language learning. By using a familiar and engaging narrative, the story captures learners' attention not only cognitively but also emotionally. More importantly, it provides direct and practical examples of syntax, morphology, and semantics in both Malay and English. This side-by-side format allows learners to notice differences in grammar rules, sentence structure, and communication style, all within a meaningful context. The story doesn't just teach language, it reinforces linguistic awareness and helps learners become more sensitive to how language functions in real-life scenarios. Reflecting on this project, I've come to see how constructive analysis is an essential method in identifying challenges that many second language learners face, especially Malay speakers learning English. By comparing the two languages, we can better design lessons and materials that target to specific differences such as word order, verb usage or tone. What made this approach especially effective was the use of narrative. Stories create a natural environment for learners to absorb and apply grammar and vocabulary, not in isolation but in context. On a personal note, this project has deepened my appreciation for the complexity of language learning. It reminded me that translation isn't just about finding word equivalents. It's about understanding culture, tone, and intent. And most importantly, it reaffirmed how valuable storytelling can be in language education, not only for comprehension but also for building confidence, fluency, and intercultural understanding. That's all from us. Thank you.